Well, hello everyone. Let me just finish this. Well, perfect. So I think for 2 minutes, let's try to think that we are in 2056, and then computing infrastructure, research in artificial intelligence and machine learning are booming. Humans eventually made it possible to build an artificial intelligence system that are not only equal to humans, but it has far exceeded human capabilities in most domains. Unfortunately for us in this 2056, the result is a superintelligence that has depleted our water resources because it's not aligned to human values, and we are not able to stop it. So just put yourself in that scenario for 1 second. If we want to now think about another type of a scenario, let's think that we are in 2039 and we have entered the era of bioterror, where viruses are now being engineered in laboratories, and the two most powerful nations are at the brink of what you could call like a bio-cold war. You are there now. Now think about where are you, what are you doing, and what would you like to see happening? Closer to where we are now is 2027, and in the same way as Tonga didn't have monitoring equipment and we couldn't prepare or predict for the eruption in 2022, we were not able to predict this new volcano called Clarisubius. And this supervolcanic eruption has thrown tons of dust and sulfates into the atmosphere, causing a global cooling of 5 degrees for several years. And this has depleted our crops, which has led to devastating loss of plant and animal life. So if you are a citizen in any of these 3 hypothetical future scenarios and you are reading the news, I want you to think for a second, who would you like to be in charge of mitigating this kind of catastrophes? Will it be that you're thinking that your government should take care of it? Should be the United Nations? Maybe the scientists that were supporting during the COVID-19 pandemics? Should it be civil society, or should it be the industry, or should it be a mix of different stakeholders? Who is part of this dream team that you would like that is taking care of mitigating any of these scenarios in that moment? And thankfully for us, we are still in 2022, and we have the luxury to not think about how to mitigate them, but how to prevent them. And to also think, who will I like that is in charge of preventing these catastrophes? And that's exactly what my presentation is about today, and what I would love to discuss with you today. So I am Clarissa Rios Rojas. I work at the Center for the Study of Existential Risk at the University of Cambridge. And this center is dedicated to the study and mitigation of risks that could lead to human extinction or civilization collapse. Some examples are the ones that I was talking about during the first minutes of the presentation. And of course, in our center, we don't do only research, but we also engage in policy. And we have been thinking, how can we tackle the global governance of global catastrophic risk and existential risks, which will be like the next level of these events when humanity cannot go back to where it was before and is just condemned to disappear forever. So there are different types of works that we have done with different stakeholders. And on the photo that is on the left, that is a report called Pathways to Linking Science and Policy in the Field of Global Risk. We made an attempt to show what has been our impact in policy. What are the different routes that the scientists can follow in order to work with governments, with industry, with civil society? What are the skills that the scientists need? We even have a step-by-step guide or things that you can consider before, during, or after you are conducting research. And of course, this is not the only output, but it compiles a series of different examples and study cases that you can go and take a look and maybe have some lessons learned. Other things that we have been doing during the last years are, for example, supporting the G20 on the production of a report on foresight that you may have heard. That is a method for trying to think about the future. We have made submissions of evidence to the UK Parliament. We have worked in collaboration with the United Nations, specifically with the Office of Disaster Risk Reduction, in order to create that report that is on the right, a framework for global science. And for the first time, the United Nations is including 3 priorities that are dealing with how to manage existential risk and global catastrophic risk. So that was a very interesting, impactful project that we had. We have been working with the World Economic Forum, writing white papers, and my colleagues at the center have been engaging with different local and international organizations, also trying to influence and bring to the attention of high-level politicians and decision makers about what could happen with the world if we don't start now thinking about this type of risks. But of course, in our center, we are thinking, can we do more? Is it enough just to try to do these little bits now and then, trying to influence policy? So we started thinking about how can we bring all these stakeholders together, the ones that I was talking before, and try to build a dream team that can be already be thinking about this type of events and how we can tackle the global governance of them. So we thought that the first stage should be working with the groups that are the most obvious one. So that will be academics and policymakers, or the policy community. So the first thing that we did was to identify these actors. And of course, within the global catastrophic risk community, we have academics that are also very engaged in policy. So we decided to focus on that smaller group. And within the policy community, we can see that there are policymakers that are already in governments or different international institutions, but there are also policy brokers. And those policy brokers will be people that is working as a bridge between academics and between policymakers. So that could be, for example, officers in the United Nations, the European Commission, the Asian Disaster Risk Reduction, in Latin America, the IAI, which is the Global Change Institute. And we decided to focus on those 2 smaller groups. So now what we wanted to do was to bring these 2 groups of actors together, and with the aim to build bridges that will allow that these 2 groups understand what are the needs of each group, what are the limitations, what is their time frame, what is the timeline that everyone has. And then by understanding even our methods, the methods that we use for predicting the future, or for the methods that you use for citizen engagement or in policy, or how to jump into different policy cycles, we hope that this dialogue is going to help us to build trust. And in that way, enhance our policy impact of this newly created group. So we start thinking, who do we need in this group? Which type of skills do we need? And of course, we thought like, okay, we already have these 2 groups. Let's think about the skills for each subgroup. So on the academics, we of course want people that has knowledge on biorisk, AI risk, natural risk, that has a little bit of knowledge on policy, of course, and global governance, and also risk communication, financial communication, even science diplomacy and government science advice. So we have the skills. What do we want with the policy brokers? Of course, we want people that is working already with global risk, or that has the doors open, let's say, to talk with policymakers in different regions. So in Latin America, Europe, Asia, Africa, and that's what we were looking. And also, of course, we need people that has financial development policy knowledge, security policy knowledge, international risk, nuclear risk. And that's why when we had this idea of what are the skills or the type of expertise that we want in the room, we decided to jump and invite people. So after 1 year, let's say, of talking and inviting and making people aware of this type of risk, we managed to bring a set of different expertise to the table. And as you can see in the side of the academics, we have the organizations that are, of course, working on this type of events: CSER, Center for the Study of Existential Risk, Future of Life Institute, the Future of Humanity Institute. And then we also have universities in Brazil, in Jamaica, in Japan with JECOAN, in Singapore, in South Africa. It was not easy to get many voices for the Global South, but we are still doing our best efforts to bring more. And on the side of the policy brokers, we have very interesting and and great partners. As you can see, we have the Joint Research Center for the European Commission, some offices from the United Nations on disarmament, also on disaster risk reduction. We have the Asian Disaster Preparedness Center in the Asian region. We have another representative from the American region, the Inter-American Development Bank, and different organizations. Of course, the International Science Council and the International Network for Government Science Advice were some of the expertise that we definitely wanted on the table, because they are some of the groups that are like leading the voice of science around the world. And then we were wondering, how do we build this dream team? And this slide that was prepared by our partners from the Simon Institute for Long-Term Governance, I think summarized it perfectly. What we wanted as a first step was to understand what are our common goals. Both groups, we want GCR prevention, GCR mitigation, so that's global catastrophic risk management. But for doing that, we need effective policies for these global catastrophic risk events. And for doing that, perhaps what we need, one of the things that we need, is to create a strong science policy interface. So that's what we said to do. And on a workshop that we hosted in October last year, we had two mini steps, let's say. The first step was to reach alignment between both groups, to decide if we need to improve global catastrophic policy, but also if we need to increase or perfect, let's say, global catastrophic risk research. So together we did a method, an exercise of prioritization, and we decided to focus on 3 or 4 aims for each goal or this type of improvements. And then on day 2, what we did was discuss more about what's going to be our mission, our vision, our mechanism of communication, how are we going to work together from now onwards. And this is a picture, a snapshot of the workshop. There are some of the participants on the right, and on the left, you can see that there was a lot of brainstorming and getting smaller groups together to think about different policy research questions, and also about our vision, our mission. And we really needed to understand what the community needs, the academic, the policy community need, and what the other community can provide to them as well. And of course, the question behind is all the time, how do we create an established mechanism to co-create policies for global catastrophic risk? Some of the workshop outcomes, of course, the most important that we probably need to have strong pillars are to defining a mission and a vision. So the ones that I'm going to read now are not set in stone. We're still developing them, but just for you to give an idea of where we think we're going as a group. So in terms of mission, we want to build an expert network that is capable of effectively working to support the global governance of these type of events by the use of scientific evidence and diplomacy. And our vision will be to contribute to a future where all species can thrive because these events have been prevented. And all other of the outcomes that we had during these workshops that I found quite interesting is, as I said, like we could identify what are the things that we want to focus or that we think is important to focus on in terms of research and policy. So this was an exercise that we did. And then, for example, you can see we need simple guides to engaging with key international negotiation conventions in terms of research capacity. Or we need a research agenda for global catastrophic risk policy relevant questions, or training of more researchers to understand and engage on policy processes. In the same way, we had also what were the top 6, let's say, on what are the things that we should be doing to engage better in policy. You can see training for policymakers on the fields of these global catastrophic risk, existential risk, GCR messages for private sector. So what are the narratives that work better when we want to communicate this type of risk to the industry or to the governments? Is it different when we want to communicate with citizens? Is it different? We should use another type of narratives. And a mapping of GCR governance of actors. Sometimes what happens with many organizations like this is that it's very focused on the North. And what we would really like is to have more voices to the global South, because if we are talking about global catastrophic events, we really need to have more voices and solutions coming from what we are doing in different parts of Latin America, Africa, and Southeast Asia, for example. And some other workshops of the outcomes is that we could map participants. We could see what each participant is doing, what they are focusing on, and which type of skills they are bringing, and if we can find some bridges between the participants to work together on different projects. We are also developing a mechanism of communication that at the moment is just writing emails. I communicate with the participants via email. Our partners from the Simon Institute are hosting a Google Drive where we have all the information that we need, for example, the slides from our presentations, or the Excel table that is mapping all participants and what they are working on at the moment, what do they need. And we also have a LinkedIn group where we are hoping that participants can engage with each other more often than just during an email sent from now and then. And we're also hosting monthly meetings since January until June. We had one recently in January, and I will tell you a little bit more about it. And of course, the main outcome, it will be the handbook or the report that I'm currently drafting, and I will be working with all the participants to co-create this report, which has the basis of why are we doing this? How are we doing it? What is our mission? What is our vision? What is our road mapping? What are our aims for this 2022 and for the next years that are coming? And the monthly meetings that we are hosting are basically made with the aim to, of course, exchange knowledge, exchange best practices, but also to make participants engage with each other so they can still keep building trust. They can see if there are some points of connection where they can engage with each other, they can work together, and hopefully they can engage outside the group between them, and they can arrange their own meetings and have discussions, and then have also projects, or bring someone from another institute to work on a project that someone is working somewhere else. So those are definitely indicators that we will be evaluating in June to see if we are doing things in the right way for this particular group. So in monthly meetings, our meeting on January was to talk about policy guides. So one of the participants has been developing a 3-page policy guide that talks about how researchers that have no previously commitment, or they have never worked with the Biological Weapon Convention at the United Nations, can work with them. What to expect if you go to one of these meetings? How do you engage? What's the demand of knowledge on these type of meetings? And then the other policy guide was about how to engage with the UK Parliament. It was a little bit more local instead of global. And there was a very rich discussion. The policy brokers were mentioning that perhaps there was lacking a quota of more policy information, like how do you really navigate this world and what's more effective and not. So that was great for the person that was producing this policy guide. She could see what are the things that are more relevant and what are the things that she can perhaps include in these policies. Our next monthly meeting will be led by Jae Kwan, and he's going to be talking about where the science policy interface has worked effectively, what the study cases he has seen or he has been working on, and then that will motivate that the rest of the group also talks about their own engagements, and so we can learn from each other. The third and fourth is probably going to be focused on how the group can fit into our common agenda initiatives about the Summit of the Future, the Global Risk Report, the Commissioner of Future Generations, which is quite linked with the things that we are doing about preventing catastrophic things in the future. And the other thing that also came up because of the conversations we have with the Biological Weapon Convention is that we probably will be also drafting something to advise the Biological Convention on the new initiative that they have about creating a Science and Technology Advisory Board. So this is my last slide, and it's just to talk about the evaluation and the stage 2 of this initiative at CSR. So the evaluation will be one in April. I will be having participants from our conference because we're hosting a conference on CSR, and I will be presenting what I'm presenting to you, but a little bit more in detail, and we will be thinking about perhaps road mapping for this project, and then I could bring this in October to the group, because we're going to get together in person in October this year and discuss it. And then in June, I'm planning to do a stop to have like an evaluation of what has been working or not, evaluate our indicators, let's say, for example, some participants are not very engaged and they don't want to be part of the group. Okay, so then we have to look for people that can replace that expertise, or we can see if there is demand of other groups that already know about this group and want to be part of. And the stage 2, which as I already mentioned, will be to bring all the participants together to Cambridge University and talk about what's next. And also if we are going to include the next level, include industry partners and social civil society partners. And that's it for me. So sorry, I'm 1 minute off. And thank you so much. You can contact me or we can engage in the questions. Thank you.